Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. The death penalty becomes a serious issue of contention in Jamaica again. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday, 26th September 2022. Details when we return.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. A lawmaker wants death penalty to be used on murderers or removed from the books. TVJ's Anthony Lugg filed this comprehensive report.
The deadly attack carried out by Roshane Barnett on 5 of his relatives in Cocopies, Clarendon, added fuel to the ongoing fiery debate around the death penalty in Jamaica. Lawmakers have also got involved in the debate, among them outspoken former National Security Minister Robert Montague. He's in favor of hanging murderers.
As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, we should build 4 more gallows. 1 in the west, 1 on the south coast, 1 on the north coast, and 1 in the east. With 5 gallows, most areas will be within 1 hour of one of them. So as the judge pass sentence, straight to the gallows you go. And you must be hung by your neck until you are dead, or until your teeth kill.
Mr. Montague was strident in his views on the matter and said since the courts no longer order the use of the death penalty, lawmakers should remove the provision.
There is a conspiracy of vested interest not to hang, but they are not bold enough to bring that amendment on the floor of this parliament and remove it. If we don't want to hang, take it off the books. Until it is removed, let us hang them by the neck until they are dead. We must hang, shoot, inject or electrocute them or remove it from the books. We cannot, Madam Speaker, cherry pick which laws we are to obey.
The MP argued that the will of a few people continue to determine how Jamaica operates regarding the death penalty, and for him, that's unacceptable.
The vast majority of Jamaicans support hanging, yet some powerful and influential people don't want hanging, and we are not obeying the law. Then we wonder why we have a crime problem in this country when we cherry pick which laws to obey.
Mr. Montague said the murder figures before and after that time supports his view that hanging is a deterrent to murders.
The population moved from 1.6 million to 2.8 over 50 years, a 57% increase. The total amount of murder went up by 400% or 4 times. Please note that in the second 25 years, we saw more access by the population to better education, better health care, counseling, mentoring, and psychological support. Yet, Madam Speaker, the only difference is that we have stopped hanging and we have created a murder factory. It is plain to see, hanging, the statistics show, is fit for purpose for Jamaica.
Anthony Lugg, TVJ News.
A call for the strengthening of vaccination campaigns as polio raises its head in parts of New York.
The director of the Pan American Health Organization, Dr. Carissa Etienne, has warned that while the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic continues to kill an estimated 4,000 lives weekly in the Americas and monkeypox case rise, the polio virus has now been detected among unvaccinated communities in New York. As a result, the Dominica-born PAHO official is calling on countries, including those in the Caribbean, to urgently strengthen surveillance and routine vaccination campaigns. Dr. Etienne told reporters that although the United States has mounted a swift public health response following detection, polio is a disease that she has never expected to see in the region again.
Antigua's Prime Minister Gaston Brown has renewed calls for a concerted global response to the perils of climate change. He has also ratcheted up calls for the world's biggest polluters to compensate states such as Antigua and Barbuda, which are facing the brunt of the impact of climate change. The Prime Minister was delivering his address to the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York on Friday afternoon. Garfield Burford of ABS News reports.
Prime Minister Honorable Gaston Brown addressing the General Assembly on the major challenges affecting small island states such as Antigua and Barbuda and the world. None bigger than climate change.
The burden falls mostly on the poor in small developing nations such as mine. And that is why, as the representative of the people of Antigua and Barbuda, I must stand up for their rights, including their right to livelihoods and to life. My voice cannot be stilled while danger gathers in the skies above my small and vulnerable country. I have no choice but to fight unrelentingly for climate justice. And that's precisely what I shall do.
Antigua and Barbuda is among 3 states which have formed a commission seeking justice for loss and damage from the effects of climate change. Prime Minister Brown explains what will be pursued at the 27th Conference of the Parties, or COP27, in Egypt later this year.
It will seek an opinion from the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea regarding the binding obligations of its member states to mitigate the effects of their greenhouse gas emissions or to pay for the loss and damage they cause. The polluter must pay.
He insists those states most responsible for the warming of the planet must provide compensation for the victims.
We insist that those states most responsible for this dire situation respect their obligations to stop global warming and to provide compensation to its victims. We will engage fully and constructively at COP27. We'll also use all means necessary to pursue the objectives of the Commission of Small States. And we invite all countries whose people's lives and livelihoods are at grave risk to join us.
A major challenge, however, has been the use of per capita income of countries to determine their eligibility for concessional financing. Prime Minister Brown renewed calls for this to be addressed.
I call in this General Assembly and all its participants to seize the opportunity to correct a wrong that has persisted far too long, that has punished middle and high-income SIDS that have performed well economically and politically despite the odds that are stacked against them. It is time to stop penalizing SIDS for good performance.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Climate change refugees could be the new thing if action is not taken swiftly. This ZNS News item has more.
Well, if left untackled, climate change and its consequences could very well lead to a global GDP loss of about 18% within the next 10 to 15 years. Figures aside, though, missing the goalpost could also translate into climate refugees, a case Prime Minister the Honourable Philip Davis reiterated during a UN General Meeting panel discussion on Tuesday.
Look what has happened in Central America, over the drought that has hit it over the last several years. The borders of the United States speaks to that. And that too will have impact on the political dynamics here in the United States. So if you don't do anything, your own self-interest ought to be heightened by the fact that these are realities that's going to face you. And you're facing it as we speak. So when these 3.5 billion people have no place to go, because they have lost the Bahamas has 100,000 square miles of ocean. It's an ocean state. 80% of my land mass is a mere 3 meters above sea level. If nothing happens, if we're lucky, we will be climate refugees.
Unlucky means the Bahamas will be at the mercy of hurricanes, losing more lives, more trauma in the aftermath. He also argued that the criteria for accessing funding should be addressed.
They say I'm a wealthy country, but having had what 5 hurricanes in the last 4 or 5 years, that's ratchet up my debt to beyond the sustainable level, why would you want to lend me more money to make it more unsustainable for me? But I'm unable to move as quickly as I would like because I have to be continually funding loss, damage,
and servicing
debt.
Meantime, Bahamian Prime Minister Philip Davis speaks to Bloomberg News about the Bahamas' intention to trade its carbon credits. ZNS News has more.
The Prime Minister spent recent months schooling the international community on the effects of climate change on the country and what mitigation methods ultimately need to be taken. After all, its impact not only leads to the grim possibility of lives being lost, but millions of dollars in damage and losses. As it stands, the Bahamas' debt to GDP ratio is a staggering 82%. Still, much lower than the over 100% the Davis administration says it met upon taking office. This has, however, warranted concern over whether the country's debt will lead to it not being able to fulfill future obligations. Prime Minister the Honorable Philip Davis says that's far from the truth, but here's what he insists on making clear, and that's that the responsibility of our debt is not of our own making.
Because if one were to look at the profile of our debt and how it was incurred, you will find that up to 40 or more percent of that debt is directly related to our consequence of climate change. And so most of our debt is basically related to matters to which we do not contribute.
The Prime Minister has stressed at every turn that industrial countries who've been using fossil fuels for centuries, their bill is due. This explains his persistent push for these countries to become more accountable.
What you must remember is that most people are now talking about mitigation and adaptation. Loss and damage is still not making its way to the agenda. And when you look at mitigation, you're talking about reducing the carbon emissions. When you talk about adaptation, we're talking about building for resilience and to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
So you talk those two things we're talking about. But what you have to realize is that there's still a lot of carbon in the air. It's not enough just to reduce our emissions now. There's still a lot of carbon up in the air that has to be sucked out.
In the meantime, the Bahamas has looked for ways and means to help itself. Carbon sinks have been identified. Once these are verified, the next step is to have them traded on the stock market.
Well, let me put it this way. Once the word got out that we were pursuing monetizing carbon credits, I had unsolicited offers just to buy it from numbers ranging from 350 million to 400 million. So for me to have had that, it tells me it's probably 4 times that.
Trinidad and Tobago's Attorney General Reginald Amor is reiterating his support for the Caribbean Court of Justice to become the final appellate court for Trinidad and Tobago. TTT News has more.
At the convening of the first hemispheric meeting of regional courts at the Hyatt on Thursday, Mr. Armour said on his appointment as Attorney General, he was given the support of government to make the transition to the CCJ. Mr. Armour said he is certain the move to replace the Privy Council as the final court of appeal will be a sound decision if and when completed.
The Honourable Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and I have spoken publicly on several occasions of the sovereign imperative for Trinidad and Tobago to take that final step towards self-determination. We are resolute in our belief and our acclamation that the Caribbean Court of Justice has more than adequately demonstrated its judicial pedigree and independence, its sound reasoning, its logic, and its ability to be innovative in its decision-making.
Mr. Armour noted there are many benefits to be derived from the CCJ and praised the court on the use of technology to enhance its access to justice.
The Caribbean Court of Justice is a shining example that work remotely done can be conducted efficiently to the benefit of stakeholders in different countries, just as I am equally certain of the benefits to our individual countries from this gathering over these 2 days.
The two-day meeting includes representatives from heads of judiciary of the Central American Court of Justice and the judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, among others, to focus on issues such as enforcement of international judgments and the relationship with domestic courts.
Hubbard's is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.